Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Orange Team Podcast, the show where we talk about tech, gaming, and a dash of whatever we want. I'm Leighton.
And I'm Mitch.
And thank you for joining us. It's been an interesting week for us and a lot of things going on. How's your week been?
Oh my gosh, my week has been chaotic to say the least, but I'm glad to be here doing the podcast. This is always a highlight of my week. Granted, for us, it's a Monday, so it's the beginning of our week. Who knows when this will be hitting the airs. But this is a better first step to start the week on, I think. And it's good to be here.
I think it's great that we do this on Monday because, Mondays tend to be where we get hit with a lot of things that we just aren't mentally prepared for. I speak for myself, but you go through everything and you're just like, but the podcast is always like a highlight for me. So it's kind of nice to go through the day and just end on a positive note. So I'm glad that you're here and I'm glad we get to do this.
This is awesome. And I guess first up on our to-do list is talk about what we've been playing lately. It being Monday, sort of like we're at the end of the weekend. We probably had some time to get into some gaming when we weren't family-ing or side project-ing. So I've been playing a little bit of Warhammer 40k Darktide lately, but I was curious to hear what you've been playing.
Oh, well, actually, before I get into that, because I've heard of Warhammer, but I'm not actually I don't know much about it. And then, so tell me just a little bit about Warhammer 40k Darktide. Like, what is it? What kind of game is it? I'm very curious.
I tried to redirect to the game you've been playing as a courtesy because I knew that once I start talking about this, I won't be able to stop. So Warhammer 40k started as a tabletop war game way back in like the 80s, and it pioneered what we call grimdark as a genre, like sort of the bleak sci-fi future where everything's just gone to crap. So that was its origin, but the Warhammer 40k games have always taken, like there was Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, I think it was called, which was a strategy game, and then there's Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader out right now, which is a CRPG kind of like Baldur's Gate 3 set in that universe, and then there's Warhammer 40k Darktide, which is for all intents and purposes Left 4 Dead Warhammer edition.
Nice.
Because it's great. There's 4 of you on a team. You get to roll through these bleak, infested, for lack of a better word, sci-fi future cities where you're crawling around on it's kind of like Coruscant. You look up and you just see more city, like as a ceiling above you, miles up in the sky. And the whole premise is that there's these chaos gods, which, as you might imagine, aren't too happy with humanity. And one of them in particular has unleashed this pestilence, like this plague, like zombie tier plague, onto the people of this one world, and turned some of them into heretics who no longer worship the God Emperor. And you're sent in as a acting agent of the Inquisition to stop them. And stopping them involves bullets and swords and chainsaw swords, which is an interesting weapon to have. Very much Gears of War.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Technically, yeah, but it's like, I think that was probably what inspired Gears of War.
I would imagine Warhammer came first.
It's the Seinfeld effect. Like, there's so many things I'm seeing in Warhammer where it's like, oh, but this series pioneered that. You know what I mean? And I've seen the legacy of it, for years now. Coming down the pipe where things have been drawing inspiration from it.
Oh, bless you.
That's the first sneeze on the podcast. I'm glad it could be me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I've been playing a lot of Darktide. It's very much Left 4 Dead. There's 4 players. You're running through the map, picking up weapons, picking each other up when you get knocked down. There's mini boss fights, and then a major boss fight at the end. Some sort of we've got to wait until the transmission gets sent out, and things are breaking, so you have to be running around and fixing them while fighting off like 800 zombies. Pretty good stuff.
That's good stuff. I was actually, while you were saying that, I was kind of curious because you mentioned Gears of War. I was like, well, when did Warhammer 40k start? It was started in September of 1987. So I'm pretty sure
it predates it a little bit.
I think Gears of War was definitely inspired by Warhammer, not the other way around.
Yeah, that would have been, I think, was Gears 1 2007? years.
Yeah, probably because I think 2006, 2007, because the Xbox 360 came out 2005, so it was at least a year or two.
2006.
Okay, yes, it was the next year because it was like the title for the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it's
The
actually
PC version
wait,
was
did it?
2007.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say like I'm pretty sure the Xbox one came out first, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, so
It did.
yeah, that's crazy. It was funny that you mentioned comparing it to Left 4 Dead because I know I didn't have it on my notes before, but I just recently played Left 4 Dead 2 again with my
Mm.
brother,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's just it's weird going back to those games from that time because I have a PC that can run those games so good now, whereas back then they were like benchmark titles for me.
Yeah.
Like running it at a full like the highest frame rate that my computer can run, like. And yeah, it's just it's you forget how fun those games still are, like how they hold up really good. So that's been one of the games I've been playing. I did that in some TF2, just basically going back down the old Valve
Nice.
rabbit hole there. It's been kind of just fun games that like I have good memories of. It's hard to believe how old some of those games are now.
Yeah.
But they're still fun. They still hold up. They're just but it'd be really cool if Valve you could maybe make another one. Maybe discover the number 3 one day.
Did you? I don't know if you saw the leaks, but like Left 4 Dead 3 was leaked, and it was very far along in development when they stopped it for whatever reason, or at least that iteration of it. It was going to be set in like Morocco or in some desert country, and it like you were seeing the level and the level designs, and they very much were reminiscent of Valve's current modern Source 2 level design
Hmm.
philosophies. I think it had a lot of potential, but for whatever reason, they decided not to go ahead with it.
Either they couldn't figure out a title that didn't have the number 3 in it, or
True.
or maybe, I mean, obviously they're far along in development, but like they've got Source 2 now, and a little theory I've had is like I wonder if they just throw another Orange Box out there, just out of nowhere, right? Because remember, Orange
Yeah.
Box that's when we got Portal, that's when we got was it episode 1 or 2 of Half-Life 2?
Episode 2.
It was episode 2, so we got episode 2, Portal, and Team Fortress 2. What else came on that Orange Box? Was just those 3?
That's like, talk about platinum hits or like value packs. Like, I don't know if there has ever been to date in gaming a better dollar per hour transaction than the Orange Box.
I agree. It was insane at the time. Like it was like you had to have that. Like if you had a gaming
Yeah.
PC, like you had the Orange Box. And I was so proud when I got that because it was yeah. But the thing is, those games that's when they launched. It wasn't. I'm pretty sure, right? I don't think it was a bundle of games that already came out. That's when Portal and Episode
Yeah,
One
they
and Team Fortress 2 they basically launched together,
Yes.
which is wild because those are like some heavy hitting games. I mean, Episode 2 was just insane for Half-Life. The ending still scars people today. And
Yeah.
Team Fortress 2, it's literally pioneered, I think, that team-based shooter genre. I mean, so much takes its inspiration from that. So many memes are made from it. To even
Well,
now,
and Team Fortress 2 was just following the trail that Team Fortress Classic had blazed before, and then Team Fortress Classic based on the Team Fortress mod for Quake. And so it's like, you're right. Team Fortress 2, I think, is greater than its predecessors. I mean, obviously, at this point. But it's interesting that it was not the first attempt to put that specific style of gameplay out into the public
I think
arena. You know what I mean?
it was beyond just the mechanics. I think that made it so good was the characters, the
Yeah.
voices, the little shorts, like everything about it it's just oozing with character about that game, and that's what
Right.
drew people in was just the goofiness and the fun of it and the over the top nature of it, versus it just being like just any other shooter. And then the graphics at the time were actually very, very unique. Like seeing this weird, like it'll just look like you're in a violent cartoon. That's what it
Yeah.
felt like playing at the time. I just remember seeing the trailer for it. I was like, what am I watching? This looks like I'm watching a cartoon, but it's a video game because it's so stylized versus all the shooters
Yeah.
at the time were like Halo and Counter-Strike and Gears of War and just, I don't know, just more gritty ones. This one was just kind of goofy, silly, but gory still.
Yeah. Going for more of a kind of a realistic, grounded approach. And then here comes Team Fortress 2, which was not only cartoony, but I feel like the art direction on that game was so good top to bottom. The way the textures were done, the way the items, the particle effects, like it really felt like it was just a graphic novel or something, a comic brought to life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it was just, I don't think we've seen anything quite like it since,
No, I think the closest thing that got to it was like Overwatch. And I remember when Overwatch was first announced, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just Blizzard trying to do Team Fortress 2. Like that's literally the thought that went through my head, and it kind of was. But like then I played that game, and OG Overwatch was one of the best games I've ever played. I was so
Yeah.
hooked on that game, and the characters and the mechanics of the game were so good. It's fallen off now, but
Yeah. It's on the
yeah,
struggle bus.
yeah. But like Team Fortress 2, like it definitely has its issues as well, but it definitely was, I think, where that kind of having a team-based shooter that had so much, it was more than just filling a role. Like, you look at like Rainbow Six Siege. It's like, I mean, I guess they're kind of more characters. I guess I don't play it enough, but to me, they're all the same, just with different abilities. Like they don't really stand out as personalities to me. Whereas like
Right.
Overwatch and Team Fortress 2, I'm sure that, I mean, I think people probably point to like Paladins, and I'm trying to think of some other team-based games where there's the characters. I mean, even look at like the MOBAs, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like it's more, you can't just make a game with just generic characters anymore. They have to have more. There's backstory, and there's characteristics in that make them fun and relatable. So anyway,
Right.
got a little tangent there, but that was fun. I've been having fun playing those again, and they run so good on my computer. It's just nice to go back to games that run great. Whereas
I saw you on Left 4 Dead 2 the other night, actually. I don't know if you saw, but another friend, a mutual friend of ours, and I were playing Left 4 Dead, I think last week.
really,
And so it's kind of funny because, yeah, it's like 'tis the season to go back and replay Left 4 Dead, apparently. But I think we played Left 4 Dead 2, but the No Mercy campaign, because it was kind of our compromise. Because we were like, which one do we play? And I'm like, well, let's play 1 in 2. Get the melee weapons.
yeah.
But it's just so well made. And the funny thing is, I was on YouTube shortly thereafter, and I discovered that I think his name is pronounced Chet Falchizek.
Mm-hmm.
Who was one of the developers at Valve in that era, now has a YouTube channel because he's started his own company, and he released a game called the Anacrusis recently on Steam, which is essentially Left 4 Dead in space. But he's making himself accessible on his YouTube channel and sharing some anecdotes and stories and lessons learned from being at Valve in that era, talking about their level design philosophies on Left 4 Dead and how they're applying them in the Anacrusis and how you can apply them in your own games. And it's just been some really interesting content there to kind of get a peek into the mind of one of the people closely involved with those games that we call them classics, and we come back and replay them, and they're just as good as they were, oh my gosh, 15 years ago. Wait, oh no. How many years ago?
Wait, which games?
2007 to
2007. Oh, that's like, yeah, like 16 years ago. No, more than that.
Oh no.
Jeez, we're getting old.
Yeah, this is not good. This is Mayday.
Mayday.
17 years ago.
Oh my
No.
gosh.
Yeah, we're playing games that are 17 years old. They can almost, buy a house.
Oh my,
Or
yeah.
they can drive.
Like the games that we grew up with that we're like, oh yeah, these games aren't that old. Like we're talking, like the Halos and Valve games. It's like they are to us what NES games and Super Nintendo games were when we were that age. Like that's kids look at like the Wii games and they're like, oh yeah, I remember when I was 3 playing Wii games. I'm like, wait, what? Like it just feels like it wasn't that long ago, but the Wii came out in 2006, so like 18 years ago.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
this is
Well, better not go down this road because we're gonna get.
Yeah, this is a dark road.
So, speaking of dark roads, this segues into our main topic of today, something that came up recently. So, as I've shared previously on other podcasts, and maybe if you don't know, I am a big YouTube person. I love YouTube. I've been following a lot of YouTubers for a very long time. Some I've just kind of followed just from a distance, but I kind of know of them, and some of them I follow very closely. Well, There's been a trend going on YouTube recently, and I think in the creative sphere in general, but specifically in YouTube seems to be getting a lot of attention right now. And there's a lot of YouTubers that are quote unquote retiring. I have to we'll have to clarify this a little later because they're not technically leaving altogether, but they're like leaving what made them famous, like their main channels. They're moving away. The big one that came up recently was Matt Pat leaving the Game Theorists. And by leaving, I mean he's not hosting any of the Theorist channels anymore starting March 9th. And which is kind of crazy. He's been a staple of YouTube for like 13 years. He's had a huge impact on it. And there's other creators that have come out as well, like Tom Scott, who's on the YouTube for 10 years, Captain Sparkles, Seth Everman, and just well, I mean, I think you had written here PewDiePie, that was a little while ago, but he's also one of those big time guys that's just kind of casually posting now when he wants. He's a dad now, which is like, again, talking about us getting older. It's like he was our high school YouTube guy, and now he's a dad. And then one I watched too, I didn't have written here, was Joel Haver and Meat Canyon. They're two other creators I follow that they're changing the way they do their work. They're not necessarily leaving, but there's a huge shift happening right now that I've noticed, and there's a lot of people making videos about this, and we're not trying to jump on the bandwagon per se as much as it's just a general curiosity from me, because I always look at what other people are doing and I want to learn from it. I want to see, like, especially for us, as we are entering this sphere, we're entering the arena with this podcast and with Thean Dreams, with games, and the things that you listen to what they're saying as their reasons for leaving. You start to wonder, like, well, are those things that I should be concerned about, or things that I can avoid, or just things I need to be prepared for that are just going to happen inevitably? Sorry. So that's why I wanted to bring this up. And so what are your thoughts on just this, on these retirements of these people leaving? Like, do you feel like it's burnout? Do you think it's just a natural progression of creativity? So you just got to move on to new things? Like, what is your feeling on that, Mitch?
Well, my gut really wants to camp for a minute on we're on the way in and they're all on the way out. Like, anytime you find yourself walking into a room and everyone else is leaving the room, you kind of stop and go, was the party over? Like, what, is it too late? Mm-hmm. I think the answer is obviously no. But right. That is a question that I think is near and dear to the hearts of many, many creatives in every possible field. Or at least this has been on my mind even for years personally, is it too late to do some of the things I would like to do with, my career? I call it my career, but just, my creative endeavors. Am I getting in on the bandwagon too late? It's a poignant question to ask oneself. And so it's funny that this is happening to us literally as we're initiating a new creative endeavor. Mm-hmm. So we get the opportunity to, from the beginning, kind of like Halo Reach, from the beginning, the end, right? Like, we get to talk about the arc of our creative endeavors from the beginning, because we get to see people leaving who have fulfilled their creative pursuits just as we're beginning. We get to, people talk about planning for failure. One thing that I think people don't do nearly enough is plan for success. That's equally as important as planning for failure, because planning for failure is one thing. Well, what if I launch Thean Dreams and we ship a couple of games and none of them reach a critical mass of sales to sustain the business? What do I do? That's an obvious question to ask. That's an obvious contingency plan to have. Equally important is, what if I launch Thean Dreams, ship a couple of games, and all of them sell 4 times my estimates? What do I do then? You need to kind of know before you're in those situations, even successful ones, what you're going to do to give yourself just as good of an opportunity to make good on those situations, instead of maybe squandering the opportunity or making mistakes or whatever. It's like, think about it. Like, what would you do? Well, I would probably try to expand the team, because obviously we'd have some liquid capital floating around, and with another team member or two, I'd be in a better position to make a bigger, better game the next time. So I think that for us here on the podcast, there are things to learn from, lessons to learn from those leaving the space, And those lessons can equally apply to potential success as they can to potential failure. Your question specifically, though, was about, kind of like what happened, like
Hmm.
what
Yeah.
what brought them to this space, right? It's tough to say, but I think The Simpsons stands as an eternal testament to there's a time to leave. There's a time to be done. There's a time that you've said all that there is to say.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not going to begrudge any of the creative members involved with The Simpsons for the fact that they've made a career out of that one show. The voice actors, the animators, the writers, and they continue to produce at least decent enough, depending on who you ask. It's
Hmm.
either still good or it's getting good again or whatever. But The Simpsons has been around since like 87, like around when Warhammer came out, right?
Yeah.
And then there's things like Calvin and Hobbes, which came out. And I think it ran for, how many years? Like 5 or 6 years, 7 maybe.
Hmm.
And when it was time to go, when Bill Watterson felt like he had said all that there was to say through the medium of Calvin and Hobbes, he gracefully left. And he didn't try to monetize. Like, he really isn't big on merchandising. There's no Calvin and Hobbes TV show. There's no Calvin and Hobbes movie. He said what he wanted to say the way he wanted to say it, and he left. There's something to be said for that. So it was 1985 to like 1995.
Yeah. Good, clean 10 years.
A good clean 10 years, and not a bad comic in the bunch.
Hmm.
I've read probably the whole series start to finish half a dozen times in my life, and I don't think I'm ever bored. There's never one where I'm like, yeah, you could tell he tried, but swing and a miss.
Yeah.
We're all human. It's like they're all just top tier.
Yeah, and I think what you've said is kind of feeds very much into the point like Matt Pat said in his video, his exit video, is that he wanted to leave on a high. He didn't want to leave when his channel was fizzling out and into obscurity. He wanted to leave while things were doing well and be done and pass the mantle, pass the torch, onto the next generation of people who want to do this channel. And he's created a great foundation. But I think there's something to be said about people that just know when to finish. And some of the greatest things that I'm sure we have in common is things we like that, at a certain point they finished well. Well, I'm going to give a few examples of TV shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender. The first, great show, 3 seasons, and it just knew when to end. We're going to pretend the season 9 didn't happen, but the show Scrubs. If you just forget season 9 happened, Scrubs was one of those shows that at season 8, it just ended perfectly. It was a great show and knew when it ended. Examples of shows that didn't know when to end: Lost, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
We talked about Simpsons. But anyway, I guess there's something to be said about just and it's a hard decision to make because you've made a career of something, and you're doing well. Like, it just seems so counterintuitive to be like, hey, this thing's doing really well, I'm going to abandon it now. And granted, not that technically all these people abandoned these things, but they just knew, like, okay, any more than this, it's going to
Overstay its welcome.
Overstay its welcome. There's just only so much story to tell, and then those things, like, people always want more, but at the end of the day, the reason they love it is because what was there was so good. Serenity,
Right.
Also, Firefly is another one, even though that one should have gone further, but it's
That should have gone a lot further.
it should have gone a lot further, but it's another one of those, like, because we only got so much, every single episode is just so beloved, and the movie is so beloved because it's just so well done. It didn't have time to get to a point where it could fail.
Right.
MCU is another example I think of too. Is like, Endgame. Oh my gosh, everything building up to that was so well executed, and then shortly after that, I just feel like the threads have fallen off. It's like the jeans are worn out. Need to get new jeans. Time to, and not to say that there aren't any good ones, but I just think that they said the story they need to tell. It's like now to try to push it further just to make money, and it's kind of a dead horse at this point.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real, Halo, right? I think
Perfect example.
this causes me physical pain to admit. I think Halo shouldn't have even gone to Reach. I think it should have ended with ODST. And here's why. Halo was fundamentally a story about humanity conquering overwhelming odds, and about kind of the stoic masked hero the faceless hero because he was meant to represent whoever put on the armor, if you will,
Hmm.
who stood in the gap and helped humanity to win against insurmountable odds. You know, like that story was told in Halos 1 through 3. ODST did an excellent job of giving you insight into, well, here's what the foot soldiers who didn't have your Mjolnir armor and didn't have your augmentations and everything else, here's what life was like for them in a given city fighting the Covenant. And it had a really cool noir vibe and everything else. They did some cool stuff creatively with it. Reach almost felt like when you have those artists like musicians who are contracted to do 4 or 5 albums, and like their final album, I'm not even going to say it's like a compilation album, but it's like you can tell that they were kind of bitter at that point, and that bleeds through into the content of the album, like that they were done. Reach tells a really, frankly, they did a great job. It's an interesting story, very kind of bleak, and it's like, I don't know. There's a time and a place for that. It kind of felt out of place relative to the rest of Halo as a series, you know, well, we knew that Reach happened and it was dark and it was bleak and it was the lowest point for humanity. But to have that be the note that Bungie intended to leave off on, like the flavor they wanted to leave in your mouth, right? The final note of the song they wanted to echo into eternity for them stepping away from the Halo universe was really bittersweet and dark. And I think that speaks more to their relationship with Microsoft at the time than anything else. And there comes a point where it's like, maybe you shouldn't have, maybe it was time to leave before that. Not that I dislike Reach, and I think it has a lot of merits, and especially creatively, don't get me wrong. I think the idea of this giving players a story of a war they literally are supposed to lose and making them still care and be invested is really, really interesting creatively, and they pulled it off very, very well.
Yeah.
But just zooming back out, it's sort of like, as a creative, do you want, it's almost like they let the tension with Microsoft or whatever bleed into the work. And it's like, maybe you should have left on, like we've been saying, on a higher note, right? Than that. Because that's a very low note to end your run on. The final cutscene of Reach is your character dying. And then if you stay till after the credits, spoiler alert, the final cutscene is your character's shattered helmet being present on Reach as it begins to grow new life in green grass and things again. But it's still a very fatalist kind of note to end on.
Though I thought technically the final scene in that was literally showing, is it Forward Unto Dawn, the ship? No, which
Forward Into Dawn's the ship in Halo 3.
No, okay, no, sorry, yep, I'm getting mixed up.
Pillar of Autumn?
Pillar of Autumn.
Oh, Pillar of Autumn ending up at
which kind of to me was like the full circle of like, this is what, I mean, Halo is what made Bungie what it is. I mean, everyone knows Bungie. I mean, I guess Destiny's now their big thing, but at the time, it was Halo, right? And it's ending right where Halo 1 began just seemed like a perfect full circle for them, kind of saying like, we're done. Like, this is a send-off. Like, we've reconnected the dots. We've literally created the Halo by connecting all our games all the way to end there. But yeah, I agree though. There's and hard. Obviously, it's hard to say because they're a company. It's not like people where we can just be like, we're done. We're gonna move away. It's like much more moving pieces to just break away and do something else.
Right.
But it's also it's the same problem of like, you've created something that's so iconic, so amazing, and just, I mean, Halo. Man, I don't even know. I mean, I think people still love Halo today, but I think that it's definitely not the same franchise as it was. But at the time, Halo was as big as I don't know if this is a good example. It was big as Mario. I mean, it really was like everybody was talking about Halo. Everyone was playing Halo. At some point, someone had interacted with Halo in some way, shape, or form, and to just be like, yep, we're done and move on to something else is terrifying, especially when you have investors and money involved. They're just like, no, you need to make another cash cow for us. So it's tough. And I think that's another thing about being creative too, is when, and this isn't to shame money because you have to get money involved. There's just no way around it. But it is really difficult as a creative when suddenly you are at the whim of someone else who's given you the capital to make this thing, but they expect a return. They don't just want to get paid back. They want to get paid back and then some. And ideally, they want to get paid back and a lot some.
Right.
And, maybe if you're small, it's not as big of an expectation, but you get to that level, there's so much money put on the line that if you don't perform, so companies are sticking to safer and safer things. So yeah, it's tough. And I see even people in the YouTube sphere as well, just kind of going back between gaming and video content creation is when they have sponsors and they have things where they're kind
Yeah.
of now beholden and they get held accountable to the things that they promote and things like that. It gets really tricky when you're trying to make a living. And, so there's a balance to be made there to still hold on to your creative freedom, but also still understand that you still got to pay the bills and you want to grow. You don't want to just stagnate. So that's why we're glad that things like Patreon exist, because you get funding directly from the people that care not just about the work, but they care about you. I think some of the best creators are the people they've fostered, hopefully not parasocial, but to a certain extent, a relationship with their people. And they're looking forward to anything you make, because even if it's different than the last thing, they like the things you make. So that's what you want to, from the beginning, explain to people, like, I'm not here to just make this one type of video, this one type of game. Like, I'm going to make this, but this next thing is going to be different, but you're going to tell it's made by me, because it's
Right.
still me making it. Like it. So if you like stuff I make, you're going to like everything else. So anyway, just kind of tangented off there, but I just feel like it's, interesting seeing this change in the creation sphere. And there's so many new players coming in, and, but I'm excited that we're starting, because there's no time like the present. I remember thinking, oh, it's too late to start, like, for a long time. I mean, I wanted to get into
Yep.
YouTube when I was like coming out of high school, and I thought it was too late then for some reason. And then we got into like the mid
Yeah.
2010s, and I thought, oh, it's too late now. All the big YouTubers are out there, but some of the biggest YouTubers now started in the mid 2010s, and now they're huge. So it's like you just don't know. You just got to do it, and you do it because you love it, not because you're trying to make money.
Yeah. And that was something that came up even just recently, like when we were starting this podcast. It's so easy to go in, because we were trying to think of a name. And so we were searching all of our possible names. And there's a podcast for like every name we could think of up until this one. It's like, if you ever want to feel like it's too late to start something, just come up with an idea and then Google it. Like, you'll find someone else who did it, guaranteed. I do the same thing with every fantasy fiction magic system, and it turns out Brandon Sanderson has done every one I can think of. And so it's sort of frustrating, because you might feel like it's all been said and done. But I think something else that Brandon would say is that, sure, that story's been told, but it hasn't been told by you in your voice. And if everybody felt as though it's already been said, it's already been done, there's no point in starting, then nothing new would ever begin. There was the best time to start a podcast would have been back when podcasts were real big, 2008, 2009. The next best time would have been 2012, 2013, 2014, when you were thinking about it. The next best time is now, and there will never be a better time than this. And so this is a good time to start. This is a good time to start Theme Dreams. This is a good time to start game development. It's never a bad time to express yourself creatively and to begin to create instead of simply consume, to simply take.
It's very easy to be a consumer.
It is very easy. And even something as simple as Bob Ross, right? Watch a Bob Ross video, go to Hobby Lobby or whatever your local, shop is that would have paints and canvas. Buy a canvas, buy some cheap paints, and follow along with a Bob Ross video. Right there, you have created something. You have brought something into the world that did not exist beforehand. That is a positive and not a drain or a negative. And for most people, even those who aren't creatively minded, it's an incredibly rewarding, relaxing, energizing experience.
Yeah. It's funny, you got me thinking about the consuming versus creating, right? I've been an avid consumer of YouTube and games and things like that, to the point where I admire all these people, and I'm like, oh, I just can't do this, or it's hard to get started, right? It's that hump of like, I'm not as good. And every single creator will tell you that the first thing you have to do is get over yourself and know that your first stuff's going to suck. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
just have to accept it. Even with this podcast, like, we know, like, I mean, we've worked a little bit to try and make this as best we can, but we know that there's room for improvement, and that's okay. We just have to
Yep.
start it. Just do it. It's the same with your games. Like, and this isn't to say like, oh, your games suck, because I actually really like some of the early games you made. But I mean, you know just as well I do. Like, they're definitely like they're the starting ones. You learn so much through that, but they're not like that's not like your whole career is defined by that, right?
Right.
And so that's the thing that, for anyone starting out is you just got to just do it. And I know that sounds so hard. And I say that because I felt that way. I was just like, I don't have time. And I realized that, like, I was able to introspect and realize, like, what was using up my time. A lot of it was like social obligations that I actually didn't need to do. Like, I'm starting to push back on different people and realize I don't have to spend. I know that's for some people, that's like, it's certain people, my family, and my family. I'm just gonna put it out there. But it doesn't mean you push away from people super hard. But you may find that you're spending too much time in certain categories that you don't necessarily have to if you want to move forward. So it's hard to be doing time management and creating, but sometimes it doesn't take a lot. Like, for example, one of my goals for this year is to start learning more on the piano, and my goal for the year is to be able to play one song. That's it.
Perfect.
It's nothing crazy. I just want to be able to, by December 31st of this year, I want to be able to play that song from beginning to end. And I might, get it done, early. It might take the whole year, but keep the goal small. And then when you accomplish that one goal, suddenly you feel so much more empowered to do the next thing. And actually,
Yeah.
because I've been trying to learn piano, I actually opened up GarageBand. I'm like, I'm gonna start messing around with this too, and I want to make some music. So I've been messing around with that.
Yep.
It's like it's a snowball effect, and suddenly I'm like, hey, this is kind of fun, and I'm learning a new skill. And I suck at this. Like, I'm sitting there like playing some buttons, and I'm like, this sounds great. I don't know what else to do with this and how to add more. But you keep doing it, like 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here, 10 minutes here, whatever amount it is,
Yeah.
you're learning. And it doesn't mean like, yeah, I mean, and then for us, I obviously GarageBand is like something you get with a Mac, so you have to buy a Mac, but there's other free programs out there that do the same thing. And yeah,
Or
so
cheap. I mean, Fruity Loops isn't that expensive. If
Yeah.
you wanted to get into it, it's like $100. You're good to go.
right, it's like not crazy. I mean, it's somewhat on your phone. If you just want to play,
Yeah.
you learn how to do music. Like, if you have an iPhone, you have GarageBand, and if you don't want GarageBand, there's other free apps on your phone. If you don't have an iPhone, you have an Android phone. I'm sure there is an app. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there is one that you can use to make some music. So yeah, there's like, there's always a way you can do it. So
So the current iteration of the theme for the CPRC, which is in the menu of Apex Centers,
Mhm.
that I created on my iPhone in GarageBand while waiting at the doctor's office.
wow,
Yeah, because I just had this idea. And so it's like, okay, we're gonna have to wait like 10 to 15 minutes. And so I just kind of roughed it out. And then when I got home, I'm like, okay, I like where this is going. And so, I polished it up. But like the heart of it was just at the doctor's office messing around on the iPhone. And so as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, the barriers to creativity are whatever you make of them. If you want to decide that you have to be at home and all the lighting has to be right and it's the right time of day and the kids are in bed or whatever to create, it's kind of like or if you want to decide that I can create anytime, anywhere, even with incomplete tools and just a notebook that you're hastily scratching down the outline for a scene for your novel, or storyboarding something you wanted to do, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You can create anytime, anywhere. The only obstacles are the ones you choose to allow.
It's so true. We have so few barriers to entry now. Like, I mean, having, phones that can record video at the level that they can, and audio, and having the processing power and the software, and it's like everything is so accessible now. And yeah, it's having to, I don't know, sorry, I just got distracted. I heard footsteps. That's, and we're not coming from a place, for those listening, we're not like saying, oh, like, we know, if you just work hard, you succeed. Like, we haven't made it yet. we're still on that journey, but we're doing this because we like it. We're not doing
Yeah.
this like I'm not like we need in order to be successful, in order to make money, we need to make a podcast. I'm like, no, I just have really wanted to make a podcast. This just is
Yeah.
fun to me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the common denominator I see in the people that have really succeeded in the creation spheres are people that just had a passion and enjoyed it, and just eventually other people, it was infectious. If you're really
Yep.
passionate about something, you pour your heart and soul into it. It may take time, but if you keep at it, you'll find that people will they'll eventually see it. And I don't know. That's just almost every creator I follow. They, in a lot of times, they were making YouTube videos for like 5 years, some of them 10 years. I think Mr. Beast, I think is a perfect example of this. Is that you look at his catalog, he was making videos for a long time with no money and no budget for anything, but just his drive and determination and love to do it. Now he's literally the most successful YouTuber of all time. I mean, guy's insane. He's an animal. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Burying himself alive for a week at a time, or how many days was that? More than a week.
he
Wasn't
did
it?
a week. No, well, he did one. He did a Bury Yourself
Was it a
Alive
week?
for like 50 hours or something, and then he just recently did one
Yeah.
where he did it for literally a week. And then he did like isolate himself in a chamber for a week. He did on a raft for a
Yep.
week. I mean, he just won't. There's
It's
no
craziness.
he just goes, gave away an island, and just he had a recent one I just watched where, I mean, it's not recent, but it's for me, is he had a person from every single country in the world compete in an Olympic style contest, and it's like, I can't remember how much money it was. It was like $500,000, I think, and
Yeah.
it's like, that's insane, like to just pull that off. And it's like he's doing stuff better than any TV channel is doing. Like the level he's doing this
Right.
stuff is just, he's putting him to shame. So
Well, this is actually a really good segue, because there's we got a question here I think we need to ask ourselves.
mhm.
And the best way to ask ourselves, especially at this early stage in our podcast and our creative endeavors, kind of look at how other people have answered this question. For us, when will we know that we have accomplished what we set out to do? Because for Mr. Beast, it seems like he just keeps scaling bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, what's the end game? The end game have him in space? Does the end game have him giving away the first home on Mars? Like there's no upper limit to that. And so maybe he doesn't have a good idea himself of when he's accomplished what he set out to do, you know? For, I think, Matt Pat and Tom Scott and Captain Sparkles, there's, even if they're not truly retiring, like disappearing for good, they know when a given creative endeavor, like for Captain Sparkles, I think he's specifically retiring from his Minecraft videos, not streaming, but like the produced Minecraft videos. Tom Scott's retiring from his, 10 things I just learned, 10 things I learned about whatever video series, or forgive me, I probably butchered that. Matt Pat's, of course, retiring as the host of The Game Theorist. They were able to identify and cross some sort of finish line creatively. So for us, when do we know? And this is a weird question to ask in what may well be our first released podcast episode. But when will we know we've accomplished what we set out to do?
That's a really difficult question, and I do want to dig into it, because I think there's obviously, there's not one answer. It's very personal. I think for each one of them, they had a different way of looking at it. I think for a lot of them, it's like, family. I think for them, a lot of them, they started out and they weren't even married or had kids, and now they have kids and their wife or spouse or whatever, and they want to spend more time with them. I know for us, that's something that's very important to us. But I think for us, if you're asking for me personally, right, I think that's where you're going to go with this. Oh, man, that's so tough. I guess to me, when I've made it is just when I can, I guess, support myself. I know that seems like not a, I don't want to say it's not a crazy, because it kind of is, but that's kind of my thing, is like, it's like if we get to the point where like, this is my full-time job and I just can create content in games and stuff that people love, and afford to pay for my house and my support my kids and my wife, and maybe I guess support a few creative endeavors, but ideally through this. That's kind of my marker. But I think that's the thing, is you start out with one marker, right? You always have one, but I think it's not unusual for the finish line to move.
True.
And it doesn't mean like finish line. Again, it's kind of similar to. So I don't know, because this is a nuanced question, right? Because like, we're just trying to define a finish line, right? For it's more like a chapter in your creative endeavor, I think, and maybe it's just one of those things you just know when you know. I don't even know if it's like I don't know if I could right this minute tell you, like, other than what I guess I just said, but like obviously that doesn't mean it's the finish line. I'm going to continue making stuff. So when do I know like this specific creative endeavor is done? Maybe when I just don't feel creatively fulfilled by it anymore, where I feel like it's more of a job and less of something that I actually like doing. So
Yeah.
I'll let you speak to this a little bit, because I think I've said my piece. But yeah, where do you find, like, where do you feel about this subject?
They say that if you work a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had I've had the opportunity to experience a little bit of that in my life, where my day job was something I truly loved, where I had a lot of flexibility in how to execute it, which meant I wasn't sitting necessarily 9 to 5 in a chair, but in most cases, it meant I was sitting in that chair a lot longer, you know? Oh, because as you identified, by the time we reach that point of self sustaining creativity, where we're able to cut a paycheck and make it our full time job to create, whether that's video games, whether that's videos themselves, something like Corridor Digital or this podcast or what have you, by the time we reach that point, we don't want to stop there. It's like, hey, we finally built it up to a self sustaining point. Let's let this roll. Now this is our job. But I think, like with any job, there will come a point where the burden of continuing in that job outweighs the immediate tangible benefits, monetary or otherwise. And especially with a creative job, it becomes a lot easier to identify when you've run out of things to say. Now, as humans, we're constantly coming up with new things to say. And as humans, we often have the audacity to believe that what we have to say is important to be heard. Podcast case in point, right?
Right.
But by the same token, there comes a point where you've told your story. Maybe your story wasn't one coherent narrative. Maybe like Brandon Sanderson's universe, it is a series of interconnected stories that sort of bounce off one another and have common characters or common threads in the background, but one of them's sci-fi and one of them's fantasy and one of them's whatever. And of course, I'm mentally mapping this to games. If I'm making games for a living, how do I know when I've said all I have to say? Every new game is a new opportunity to tell a new story. I think there will invariably come a time where it's time for me to hand it on. And I think that for me, I will know that I've accomplished what I've set out to do when I construct a company that can outlast me, that has other employees, that is providing for other people, that is something that I can step away from and it can continue to exist and continue to provide employment and opportunities and an arena for other people's creative endeavors to shine and to be seen and to be heard, for their stories to be told. And I can, I don't know that I'll ever truly retire. And this is something I decided about my life actually very early on. Like when I was still in college, I specifically chose some of the career paths that I did because I anticipate that I'm going to work until I can't work anymore, that there won't be a distinct point where I retire. So I said, I better have a job that I can do, frankly, from a bed on a laptop. You know what I mean? If that's what it comes down to. And software development was one of them. And I've always been passionate about games. And so game development kind of became a natural offshoot of that. So it satisfies my desire for storytelling, which again, writing novels, storytelling, that's something else you can do from a laptop, from a bed. what have you. So just, I think the creative life is something that can, it's a torch passed on from creator to creator.
Hmm.
And I don't know that it's truly something you ever retire from or clock out from. It's just, it is an extension of you, or it can be, until it literally can be no longer.
Yeah. Something kind of, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I don't know, something you said triggered this, but I wrote it down. But I think one of the ways you know when you're done, so like the difference is two different ways of doing things creatively. Is if you're doing it, if the work is fueled by creativity, you will know when it's time to be done. I think something you said about basically, I don't know, just pushing yourself creatively. It's like if that's what's pushing you is the creativity, then you will know when the work is done because you'll be exhausted in that. If your business and everything, if it's fueled by business and money, you won't know it's time to be done until the money's gone. I look at like a lot of the people that kind of fizzle out. It's like that's what ends it, is just they ran out of money. They weren't fueled by a creative passion. It's just, because I think when you're creatively at a certain point, you're like, oh, it's not like, oh, the views are down. It's just like, this isn't fulfilling. And that's why the views are down, because they
Yeah.
can tell. But if you're just constantly pushing yourself in new creative avenues, you'll realize like, okay, you'll find new success because your passion, people always are addicted to passion. I think if
Yeah.
you're anyone that I follow online, I just love listening to them. It's not even the work they create. I like listening to them because they're so passionate about the subject versus they're just like, I don't know, they're just like, oh yeah, I do this because it makes money. It's like if you love it, you'll draw a crowd. It's like if you build it, they will
Yeah.
come kind of thing. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's funny thinking that long term because I don't know. I guess you're right though. I think I prepare for failure, not for success. Maybe it's just, I think that's just a normal human nature though.
It
To
is.
yeah, we store up nuts for the winter, not think that they'll be playing nuts next summer.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't prepare for failure at all.
Right.
To be clear, what I was saying was just the same as you prepare for failure, you should also be preparing for success. And
Absolutely.
a lot of people don't do that. Like they kind of, I know people I've spoken, friends of mine who I've talked about life stuff with, will occasionally say, yeah, that should be great, but is it really going to happen? And it's like, well, it might not. Life is life. But if it does, it's almost like you've got to be ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're surprised by something joyous, like a positive change in your life, and you don't, it's like, well, I never thought this would happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's a point where emotions get involved, and emotions are always involved, but then you can start making mistakes, and you can start like, oh man, if I had only thought about it a little bit more. The runway to think about it is now. Like, what if this podcast takes off? What if Theme Dreams blows up and our games just become, I'm not even going to have the audacity to say front page Steam bestsellers. I am going to have the audacity to say, what if they sell 40,000 copies per game? Because I'm budgeting for like 15,000 copies a game or whatever. Maybe I shouldn't be sharing these numbers on a podcast. But the point being, what if it sells 4 times my projections? What am I going to do with that? I've got to already be thinking about it so that when it happens, I'm not completely blindsided, and I'm not, I'm better equipped to make the most of that.
Yeah, and I think it's that mind over matter kind of thing a little bit, and then not to get into anything. I don't know. Like I see some people get a little bit weird about these ideas of like manifesting things, but it's also there is a psychological element of if you're assuming that this is not going to work, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
If you go
You
in, yeah, if you go in feeling like this is going to work, I mean, it may not, but if you go in with the mindset of this can work, this is going to see successful, you're just the way you go about things, your personality, your way you present yourself, the way you just do your work, it just changes because
Yeah.
there's hope. There's a sense of like there is a positive outcome coming from this. So I think, yeah, it's about you do need to have both of those. You do need to be prepared because Don't just assume it's all going to work and then have nothing left at the end. But at the same time, don't be afraid to dream. Don't be afraid to hope. Don't be afraid to, because the more timid you are, okay, here's a good example. I like to ride mountain bikes. And one of the things when you're going mountain biking is if you're too afraid and you hesitate too much, you actually make it way more dangerous for yourself. You still need to be smart. You
Yep.
don't go full crazy into something without a little bit of thought and skill. But at the same time, there's certain things that if you don't just send it into something,
Yep.
you are actually going to be in more danger than if you just fully committed to it. And that's the truth of so many things, whether it be creatively or business, whoever you are listening to this, you might be in a different place than us, as far as your work and what you do. But, it doesn't matter what you do. If you give it everything, you send it, you're way more likely to succeed than if you just take it too easy. And it's a balance, right? I'm not trying to tell people like go do crazy, ridiculous things without a plan. But like, I guess to go back to the bike metaphors, like I have a really good bike. Like I plan because I have a good bike and I've practiced and I make sure I've got protective equipment on. And, it's not like I'm just being stupid, but at the same time, it's that.
And
example.
well, I was just going to say, you're not going to bomb that massive hill first thing. Buy your brand new bike and just, I'm going to go to the top of the, double black diamond hill or whatever. You're going to start with the smaller hills.
Right.
But when it comes time to hit that big hill, you will have your protective gear, you will have a good bike, and you will have practiced on smaller hills, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, and it's a certain crossroads. So you've done all the things, you've done the prep work. So like you still have to put in the effort, so you have to put in the work, and you still have to be smart about it. Plan, prepare. Right. But there will come a crossroads where there is a decision to be made, and that's when you have to decide: am I going to send it, or am I going to be timid about it? And that's what we're getting at, I guess, in my opinion. Not saying you, like, again, first thing you do is send it. It's more you go in knowing you're going to succeed. And with the maybe the mountain bike thing's falling apart, but that's just my mindset because I was just riding recently. Is like there's rocks and stuff, and I'm like,
yeah, it works.
I mean, it's true of a lot of things. I mean, I went skydiving last year. And yeah, there's no, that's actually probably, I mean, there's a lot of prep. I didn't have to do a lot of the prep. That was all the other people, but there's a lot of prep. But at the end of the day,
hopefully everyone else prepared.
Yeah.
Like the pilot and
trust
the
me,
instructors.
there was a lot of thoughts going through my mind before we jumped. But at the end of the day, that's absolutely a send it. There is no in between. Like you either get out of the plane or you don't. And when you get out of that plane, you are absolutely in a whole different mindset. You're thinking differently. You're doing things different. But again, it's just, there's so much to be said about just there is a point, there's a decision that eventually you do have to make. And it is a tough one. It's a scary one. It will never not be scary. You will always be put at a point in your life where you have to make a decision that there is risk. There is a point where it may not work. But if you just say it's going to work and go into it, you're more likely to succeed. It's just not guaranteed to succeed, but you're statistically more likely to succeed if you just go into it with that mindset.
100%. It's very much like longboarding, which I haven't done a ton of mountain biking. I've done a little bit. I know what you're talking about, but like longboarding, same story. If you're bombing a hill and you lean back and away from bombing the hill, when you hit the speed wobbles, your center of gravity is further back, and you're going to get thrown because of the nature of the speed wobbles. They're kicking around. They're making the board kind of whip back and forth, right? If you place your front foot right on top of the front trucks of your longboard and you lean so that your center of gravity is right over those front trucks, even if and when you do get the speed wobbles, it's only making the rear axle, the rear tires whip around, and you can continue to stay on the board. Even at speed, even with the back doing whatever it's going to be doing, because you've got your weight leaned into the motion and your momentum, and that's the only way to not die. When you're bombing it. So no, I like where you went with that. I think that's really good. I don't know if you heard, but apparently we've got some construction going on in the house or something upstairs. So
I got I heard a movie playing behind me, so I'm sure I didn't pick up any of that, but I thought I heard someone singing next to my door. But
I haven't heard it yet. But
good.
I mean, on that note, this year Leighton, you and I, let's send it with this podcast. And this year, let's send it with Theme Dreams, whatever that looks like. Listening to this, Andrew, anybody else on my Theme Dreams team, Melinda, that's listening to this, let's send it this year. Let's make something cool. And even if we all end up going back to our day jobs after it, at least that thing is in the world now, whereas it was not before. And that's really what life is all about. The act of creating something new.
Yep, adding something to the world, not taking from it. So I'm excited. I think this is going to be a really good podcast. I'm really excited about not just the podcast, but just the games and everything we got coming. I hope you guys will continue to listen those out there, and we have a lot of exciting things coming this year. It's a year of change, a lot of new things coming. It'll be little bits by it. We'll kind of drop little bits. Mitch is definitely going to be at the forefront of that, so he'll be kind of dropping in what's new, what's happening. And we just thank you so much for listening to the Orange Team podcast, and we hope to see you again soon. And until next week, have a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever time it is. And goodbye.
Bye bye.